All right, folks, welcome to another podcast. Today, we have two amazing guys that have been killing it on social media during the war and have been informing millions of people, really, all over the world, talking about what's really happening here in Israel, combating a lot of the misinformation from mainstream media, reporting, what have you. And my wife actually is the one that I think drew my attention to y'all and was like, "Hey, have you heard of this guy? Have you seen this video? Have you?" I was just like, "Actually, I think," but I ended up actually following you guys more seriously, and just blown away from the information that you guys have been putting out, and huge respect to the work you're doing, and that is why today you're on this podcast. That is why you're here, because the whole point of this podcast is to get people who have getting the real people that are going to tell the real story, not these armchair experts who so-called think they know what they're talking about, but just essentially just want the world to hear their nonsense. And so you guys are in central Israel, if I understand correctly. Is that right?
Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv.
Yep.
So central
We're
Israel.
We're my homework. We thought we did together. It'd be nicer,
Perfect. So you're in central Tel Aviv. You guys work in the typical high tech field, if I understand correctly. Tell the folks more or less what you do, yeah, go for it.
Sure. Well, Eli and I are colleagues and we're friends, and we work in the same space. I own my own little branding agency, an international branding agency in Tel Aviv. So high tech is one of the fields, although we're industry agnostic with the work that we do at Natty Branding Agency. Yeah. And I also have tremendous respect for Eli as a colleague and as a professional. But I'm in the world of branding, essentially with my branding agency.
Yeah, right. And so we met through a mutual client. I do all the work with startups, helping them to create their pitch, fundraising, and a lot of work with communication, training, and consulting, professional and personal development as well. So we had a mutual client. Put us in touch. Eitan had been doing the branding work. I'd been doing the pitch work. We all went out for a couple of quarters beers and
it's like that. That's right. Yeah. It was a good click we had.
That's awesome. So I really appreciate the whole branding field. I've been watching your some of your clients there on your website, Eitan, and I work in basically executive protection is my professional work besides YouTubing and social media and doing Hasbara. And I've had a lot of interaction with the high tech world, with essentially trying to branding is actually a real big component of trying to sell whatever it is that you're developing. And essentially, would you say so? You guys are in the eco space of the the startup nation that we're labeled globally, but essentially the Silicon Valley of Israel. And so you have a lot of, I imagine a lot of your clients and a lot of the things that you kind of rub shoulders with is that kind of world. What is that like?
I mean, the beautiful thing about branding and what I love so much about it is you get to touch a lot of different organizations, companies, products, services, and whether it's a sustainable goods, or organizations that are doing good for the world, or fintech. I mean, there's so much, and there's so much coming out of Israel. I mean, my agency, we do a lot of international branding. And we do a lot of branding for Israeli companies that come out of startup nation that need an international brand. So we get to experience a lot of just crazy things that come out of Israel, which I know that Eli does as well. And it's obviously this year has been much more challenging. And, I've committed myself to Jewish advocacy. But I love the fact that we are able to work with such incredible talent, such incredible ideas coming out of Israel. But that's me.
No, correct. The startup nation is a real thing. The innovation of the population here, I think Tel Aviv has got the highest percentage capita number of startups in the world. And there's a solution to every problem you can think of. Not all of them make it. A lot of startups don't make it, unfortunately. That's just life.
Mm.
But I have the benefit, the blessing really, of seeing the ideas in the raw stage. Because the ones that don't make it, no one ever hears about. And they can be excellent ideas. Just not everything is want to raise the money and get off the ground. But I
Exactly.
see that, I'm inspired by it, and I love it.
The talent here is off the charts. I mean, the drive that people have, the
Mhm.
ingenuity, the different approach to solving problems, which we know Israel. I mean, you can see it,
Mhm.
all over the world, but specifically with business. And I think really the majority of the time, the reason why the startups, as Eddie said, that you don't see because they didn't make it is not usually because of the anything other than maybe like partnerships that don't work out, and but the talent for innovative ideas is off the charts here in Israel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the culture in Israel. People often ask me, how do we replicate the startup mission in other countries? I grew up in Australia, and I've had people, how do we do this in Australia? And it's not about the government sort of programs or ecosystem elements like startup accelerators. It's not that. There's a culture in Israel that really prizes innovation. We value creative ideas. People will sit together over coffee and just share ideas about how to solve things. Uh, and the culture is very easy on failure. If something doesn't work out, people don't think badly of you. One friend of mine is a lawyer in the startup space, and he lived in the US for a lot of time. I asked him, what's the difference between the Israeli startup culture and the US startup culture? He said, in the US, people judge you by where you've been. So if you have a nice car, it's a sign that you've been successful in the past and you've got that proof now. He said, in Israel, people don't care where you've been. No one knows where you're going. If you got a fancy car now, but at the moment you're boring, don't care about your car. Oh, that's nice. This future focus.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So yeah, I've definitely, like I said, I've had some involvement through my clients that I've provided security for. In fact, a lot of them have been the actual investors, so I get to hear a lot of the ideas pitched to them and why they should open up their pocket to put into the latest, greatest startups. So I've had the privilege to really see a lot of that through my work. And then I've had some dabbling in startup myself. But again, that's kind of a future discussion because things are in development. But um, in my opinion, it's actually harder to start a startup in Israel than it would be in the US. Is kind of my opinion and through my experience. But am I wrong in that? Isn't it actually even harder for Israeli startups to kind of get going? So like a little more challenging than you would be as far as regulations and red tape, et cetera? Or am I wrong in my
I don't know. I mean,
thinking on
you know,
that?
the, I don't know that I'm qualified to answer that. I mean, I think it's hard anywhere,
Yeah.
but but there are so many people. Look, you're in a small country with a lot of people that know each other. There's a network here of people that know each other. There's an army that people. A lot of the startup nation comes out of. Um, think about like the fact that American kids or Western kids, they're out of school at 18, maybe they'll take a little time off, but then they're in college. And here you have the army. So there's a little bit more time for people to think, figure out what they want to do, bond with other people. There's lots of, intelligence units in the Israeli army. So you come out and you have a network and a mindset that kind of like drives you, along with idea of culture, with this culture that we live in where anything goes. Like Alex said, it's
Yeah.
future focused.
Yeah.
You can dream. And also geographically, we are isolated. If you look at all of our neighbors, they're not exactly friendly. So people have this drive to succeed outside of Israel. And then you have Jewish culture and Jewish education, which is hardworking, and the community pushes that too. So I think those things work in our favor here in Israel, but I don't think that makes it any easier in the States.
So I did live in the US for a while in Southern California, and I did a lot of work with the Northern California region, Silicon Valley, in the tech industry. What I find difference is that Israel is a true ecosystem, right? Yeah, there's a lot of accelerated programs. There's a lot of startup incubators. There's a lot of assistance and support, everything from finance to marketing to what I do, Eitan, the marketing, pitching. There's a lot of people who help you, and it's the industry is more open. So you could quite realistically get time with the CEO of a large company in Israel that you wouldn't easily get in another country. They're more open to it. Friends of friends, or even just someone who shows a bit of initiative. You might say, that sounds interesting. Let's make some time. It's a little bit more open, a bit more egalitarian. The CEO and the, new engineer with an idea can make time, where there's more of a hierarchy I find in other countries.
Yeah, I find that there's a lot of there's a mentorship mindset here, and it's not because, oh, I'm a mentor. It's like literally because of the community here, and because people here are in the same, we're all in the same shit together. People want to help each other,
Yeah.
and I find that even me, I'll meet young companies, and I know that they can't afford my services, but I'm kind of like, I'm here. If you ever need anything, I'm here for you. And I know that a lot of people are like that. I'm not a minority there, and I don't know. I don't know that that exists on such a scale in other countries. But here in Israel, it's like, we're a small village, so everyone wants to help each other.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's great. It's great to be a part of it. I kind of miss it because I've been doing so much advocacy that I've kind of like made it my priority.
Mhm.
uh, I'm not doing as much branding with companies like I used to in the last year and a half. But that's the decision I made for now.
So okay, so now let's transition actually to that. What 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 led you actually to get into Hasbara? Because most of the people I know in your field, they don't do Hasbara. They kind of stay in their bubble, of whatever it is that they're developing there in Tel Aviv, creating brands. I mean, I think they don't really um, have much time for anything else as well, because they're also competing with everyone else in the industry of whatever that is. And then it's very rare that you're going to see somebody in that community kind of stick out. I know of maybe Eli Fould, who's one that sticks out, but other than that, it's you guys are
Oh,
the only ones. Huh?
Hilal's balls. Yeah.
Yeah, Elon Fold, exactly. So he's one of the few that I've seen in that industry that are also doing Hasbara. So what led you guys into that?
Been in it for a long time.
Yeah, I've been doing it for almost 15 years. Like I run Natty, the branding agency, but I've always ever since I got back to Israel, which was 15, 16 years ago, I've always spoken up and been vocal about. I mean, I don't call it Hasbara because Hasbara is not exactly what I do. I think Hasbara is when you're really the literal translation means to explain, lasbir.
Mhm,
And while we certainly do that, and I do it, the main focus, what I'm really really good at is I'm good at being who I am. I mean, I
mhm,
think that's what I'm good at. And being who you are is also being open about it and speaking up, and especially in a world that doesn't understand the Jewish people and doesn't understand the story of Israel.
yeah,
So when I got here around 15 years ago, some of my work already started going viral, from Shalom Motherfucker to I'm That Jew. And in the last year and a half, I doubled down on it. The way that I got into it was literally because I saw a long time ago, and we've had this for decades, we've had this for hundreds of years, for thousands of years. But in my little world, I just saw that I think I'm eager for people to know who I am and where I come from, and my culture and my identity. And if I have the ability to be who I am, and I'm good at that, then when it comes to this, I'd like to I'd like to share that with the world. And that's when I started doing it. And it just so happens that on October 7th, I think for a lot of people who started advocating, there was this huge um, desire, need for people to speak up. And that's when my stuff started exploding. And we'll get to how Ellie and I met, but that's just me. What about you?
mhm,
Well, I actually moved to Israel about 7 years ago, 6.5 to 7 years ago now. My great grandparents were from Jerusalem, and
Mm-hmm.
we've got many generations. We can't trace it how far back in Jerusalem. There was actually a massacre in the 1930s. So it was similar to October 7th, but on a smaller scale. They didn't have the technology, etc. And at the time in South Africa, Johannesburg was going through a gold mine, gold rush. And so there was an opportunity of some Jewish communities happening. My great-grandfather was a rabbi, so they moved from Jerusalem to Johannesburg, South Africa, and my parents later on took the family to Australia. And as I went through my career experience working with Apple computers, working with different large companies, and I really had, just by luck, learned some really valuable stuff. I started to observe this BDS movement, boycott, divest, and sanction, people trying to hurt Israel economically, and I just saw that it was so unfair, it was so underhand, and I thought I want to do what I can do to empower Israeli businesses. So I made a decision at one point to move out here, move the family out here, so they can do what they want to do to hurt Israeli businesses. I'm going to do everything I can, every piece of knowledge I've ever acquired, I'm going to feed into Israeli companies to make them the best they can possibly be in what I do, which
Mm-hmm.
is I work in terms of coaching people for presentations. I want to make sure they're like world-class speakers that get a standing ovation. To train salespeople, how to have a professional sales conversation, negotiation training, conflict resolution, written communication skills. So I came over almost with a Zionist sort of agenda, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when the war hit, I realized that there was so much misinformation. A big part of what I do with startup pitches and presentations is taking complex concepts and simplifying them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to do the same thing in this space. The
Yeah.
power of spoken word and the power of, I call it linguistic elegance, that the same thing phrased different ways can have a very different impact. So I just found myself, I thought I can't let this go. I'd hear someone say something, and I got to deal with it. So I'd write a script, I'd record it and put it up. And then that's when Eitan got in touch with me and said, let's do this together.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think that when you're in this crazy situation that we're in, people are very surprised that it got to this stage. And I'm not surprised because I've been watching it and speaking up against it for over a decade.
Mm.
But we don't have anything to hide. And one of the things about advocacy is, you're advocating. What are you advocating for? And I like to be truthful. I like to be who I am. And being someone who lived in Hong Kong and in London and in Boston and New York and working at some of the top agencies in the world with Apple and with Facebook and with YouTube and Gmail and all of these companies that I've worked in, I would find myself abroad just speaking up for Israel all the time. I'm talking about in the past 15 years, even when things were quiet, there's such a misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
So what you said at the beginning about not seeing a lot of people in our space speaking up, it's a scary thing to speak up because you're putting your livelihood on the line, like quite literally. But
Yeah.
I was doing 15 years ago when I was sitting down in Ogilvy and Mather in New York City and talking about Israel and what Israel was doing, not 15 years ago, actually before I came to Israel, with some very, very liberal people that, and I'm not saying anything against liberal people. I'm just saying that the mindset is so different because there's such a misunderstanding. And
Mm-hmm.
already on the ground, I had an opportunity to try and sway hearts and minds just by being who I am and being what I'd like to think of a man of integrity as Eddie is. Then if you have integrity and you're perceived as such, then you can actually have conversations with people. And I do wish that there were more people speaking up because we have a certain skill set, and it's a skill set that the government of Israel, the current government of Israel, doesn't have. Previous governments of Israel don't have. Jewish leadership, I'm talking about major organizations, don't have, and even more so now. You can see a year and a half almost after October 7th, we're still not collectively as a group speaking and advocating in a way that that is effective. So that's another reason, and I'm sure I can speak for anyone in the room. They say this, that's the reason, because no one else is. I wouldn't say no one else, but
Right.
not enough people are doing it, and it's not organized. Which I'm sure, you can see too. And
Mhm.
we hear it, I mean, we see it. So that's another motivating factor. Like, who else is going to do this? So we just kind of decided to do it, and then we started talking, which I'm happy to talk about as well. How that happened.
Well, that's awesome because that's exactly what I've pitched every time I meet anyone from the foreign ministry and anyone who deals with Hasbara. Because I've always been very upfront about you guys suck at this job. You guys are misrepresenting Israel in the most horrible way because you just do it in such a wrong way, right? And like you're pointing out, I mean, I'm being very maybe more aggressive in the way I'm pointing it out, but I am just appalled that a nation that is so successful in startup, in branding of all kinds of big, because branding is a big part of selling your product, right? And so we're able to brand Mobileye, Waze, WhatsApp, whatever the Israeli technology is, and get it all over. Huh?
WhatsApp, WhatsApp's from South America. We can't do it.
Forgive me, forgive me.
But
But we use
here's
it here more than anywhere else in the world, I think.
you're almost right, because the messaging, the technology behind it came from ICQ, which was
The
Israeli. So
ICQ. That's yeah. There you go. Yeah, ICQ is Israel. So you know what I mean. So I've always pitched and said, hey, why don't you get people who sell Audi, or you get people who are in branding that sell, I don't know, Nike, get these people to sell Israel, to explain Israel in an honest way.
I think that's a chat. Well, first of all, there's a couple of challenges there. One is you're
Yeah.
absolutely about them doing an awful job, them being the powers that be.
Yeah.
But I think that when like, I can speak personally, being someone who's done branding at the top international levels in for decades, and having been focused on Israel mainly for the last 15 years with branding companies, Israelis really don't understand brand. Um,
Mm.
it's something that is still being learnt. It's in the culture of the West, brand. But here in Israel, it's an R&D country. And you see this when you meet heads of companies here. Like, I'm talking about companies that have raised maybe $1 million and companies that have raised 50 million. They don't necessarily understand the power of brand. They
Mm.
don't get it. CEO doesn't get it. Even many times the CMO doesn't get it. So to me, it's not surprising that they're doing such a lousy job, because Israelis are not good at communicating. Israelis are good at practically everything but communicating. And so
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
needs change. But I don't believe that bringing in an ad agency or bringing in people that know how to brand, Audis or Pampers will work. Why? Because
Right.
you're ultimately talking about, what is Israel? Israel is the story of the Jewish people,
Mm.
which includes other people that are part of our, part of the country of Israel. And
Mm.
it requires a lot of heart and soul. It requires fact, and it requires the ability to communicate, but it requires also heart and soul and authenticity. And
Mhm.
I've worked in the advertising industry, and I can tell you that one of the challenges I had working in advertising was, a lot of times it's a bunch of people who want to make something cool, or to make something that resonates, but on the wrong thing. It relies on the wrong stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's as simple as just getting professionals. It has to be the right professionals. It has to be also people that understand Jewish identity, who understand how to operate in a world which has a lot of enemies, and enemies who are successful at narrative because they understand narrative, they invest in narrative. They've been doing it for a long time, which we haven't, which we need to start doing, like investing in the long run. But we've got to start. And I think one of the biggest failures that I've seen in the Jewish community is, even now, after almost a year and a half, people are still not doing it the right way, and are investing in the wrong entities, and many times in the wrong people. Um,
Hmm.
and it's challenging. I think we're just at the beginning of starting to figure out this problem that we're in.
one of
Yeah.
the challenges is, I think, in Israeli culture, it's a very direct culture in
Hmm.
terms of communication. And it's very truthful culture, it's very honest culture. So you'll see people, catch up, they go, right? You're not looking so good. You immediately say you're not sleeping well. What's going on? You're not eating well. Well, it's just an observation, and I mean I didn't mean that. Great, it's fine, but
Sleeping well,
okay, but see, Eitan would do it. He'd say, "You're right. I'm not sleeping so well. I got," and I'm going to say, "Well, why don't you try this solution? Try this
Yeah.
medication, this whatever."
My Jewish
Yeah.
mama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very direct. So Israelis will do the same with the international community and say, "Hey, look, this is what we did. This is what they did," and and our enemies, masters, manipulating the truth.
Yeah.
Right? And it's very hard to refute that, because if someone says, if someone labels you with an accusation of some kind of atrocity, now it's up to you to disprove it.
Mhm.
Hasbara, explain your way out of it, so which puts you on the defense.
So
Yes. Yes.
I'm not-
Exactly.
wonder sometimes, because there's so much evidence to the contrary. People say Israel is starving the people of Gaza. And it's like up in arms about that. And unfortunately, a lot of the media out there, a lot of the what we call mainstream media, they'll just parrot this stuff.
Legacy media.
Misleading headlines,
Mm.
lack of content. Now, you could easily prove that Israel's not starving the Gazans. You just count the trucks of food that have been, sent
Oh,
in.
yeah.
They've got them. There's no problem. You can
Mhm.
count the calories per person. You can also see that it doesn't get to the people. Often it's stolen by Hamas, which
Right.
is then sold to the black market. They take the money, then they pay 16-year-olds to pick up a rifle and become jihadists. So the facts are there. And a lot of people don't care about the facts. It's like it's almost like the medieval blood libel. The Jews are kidnapping Christian children and drinking their blood. You
Mhm.
go, you think of anything more preposterous? How do you disprove that? Like,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and based on what Eli is saying, is it our enemies are not the Palestinians. Like, meaning, of course,
Right.
right now the Palestinians are our enemy, and we're trying to defeat our enemy. We're at war,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
But to think about who is funding the Palestinians, and where is this coming from? And because I want to answer your question about communication.
Mhm.
Where our enemies have succeeded is they determined their vision a long time ago, and not 2 or 3 years ago. They determined their vision a few decades ago.
Mhm.
And their vision was to destroy the reputation of the Jewish state. Now, that's their vision. Make them the enemy,
Yeah.
make them evil incarnate. Then what they did was they invested tons and tons and tons of money in that, which you must do to build a brand. And they were consistent with it. And they were very specific about the audiences that they were reaching, which is exactly what we should have been doing, which is we have to determine what our vision is.
Mhm.
And our is not to destroy anyone out there. Our vision is to determine and express to the world who we are and what we do as a country and as a nation of Jewish people. We have to, that's our vision. We need to invest billions of dollars in that. We have to figure out who our audience is, and we have to be consistent with it. That is where Jewish leadership and Israeli leadership has failed and continues to fail. And I think that that's a very important point to make, so that people understand that this whole PR disaster that we're in didn't happen by accident, didn't happen because of October 7th. It happened because of coordinated strategic effort. And if you look at it in our language, in terms of marketing and branding and companies, we're basically a company, the Jewish people, the state of Israel. That's the
Mm.
example. And we have other companies out there that detest us and are trying to put us out of business. That's
Mhm.
what's happening. The antidote to that is to start investing in our narrative. And that's why Ellie and I are doing what we're doing, along with quite a few other people who have put everything on the line to just do that, because no one's doing it. So I'm doing
Mhm.
it for my kids.
Mhm.
I'm sure Ellie as well. I mean,
duh.
So I wish more people were doing it, but not everyone knows how to do it. Not even the biggest professionals who have done some of the leading campaigns in the world, who I've spoken to, because that's my world. When I
Mhm.
started operating with them, good intentions aside, not all of them were able to get this across, because it requires a passion as well.
Yeah.
So it's a complex challenge, because in a traditional environment, like Eitan said, commercial environment, and a competitor's trying to outcompete you, there's an element of truth and decency around there. In our world, our enemies lie constantly. In the commercial world, if you tell a fabrication about another company, they'll take you to court. You can't do that. People said, "What about Israel?" And so our narrative, so to speak, has got to be so solid and so clear. It's an interesting challenge. What Eitan's done is he's gone to the center of the Jewish identity. And people have loved that. So this idea, I'm that Jew, right? It's simple, it's powerful, and the world has really embraced it, the Jewish world. It's not trying to explain every nuance of what the enemy's saying. It's just like, get to the identity and empower that.
Yeah.
And I understand it's important too, but this wasn't really done before.
Yeah, I think that
Correct.
I think what I'm trying to create with I'm that Jew, and it's not for me. It's not Eitan I'm that Jew. It's like Eli is I'm that Jew. He can, you're I'm that Jew. Like, you get to express who you are, not with defense. It's with statement. I mean, you look at the words I'm that Jew. That's a statement driven, kind of like statement driven narrative, which is inclusive of all Jews and also our allies. You can be, I'm not standing true as a friend to the Jew, and I think it starts there. It starts with Jewish identity, because no Jewish, no Israel, So the idea is to go to the values of the Jewish people, which actually touches a lot on what Eli and I are trying to do with E&E, which is the series that we created. It actually, if you think about it, we're trying to explain and break myths, myth busters, but that are based on values of truth, on digging deep, which Eli does an extraordinary job. Like, Eli is kind of like, he's predominantly the one that does the research, but they're based on morality, on hard work, and diving deep to get to the facts, to get to the truth, which is what the Jewish identity is. If you think about the word Israel, Israel is kind of like wrestling with God, wrestling with the truth.
Yeah.
It's based on truth. It's going to places that are uncomfortable, but they're based on Jewish values. And I think that that's actually our story. I think that that's our way out of this, is to be who you are, is to just put it out there, be who you are.
It's challenging.
That's people are trying to destroy who you are and your reputation.
Correct.
Part of the problem is we live in a world where oppression has become sanctified. It's hard for Israel to claim to be oppressed. We could say we're being attacked by thousands of missiles, but then people say you're shooting them out of the sky with a technology that no one else has. So you don't seem to be too badly off. You're actually doing quite okay, which is not the fact. I mean, being, shot with missiles on a regular basis is unacceptable.
Yeah.
They're taken out, not all taken out. Some people do get, I was just telling Eitan now, my mother's staying with me now. If she has to run to a bomb shelter at her age, more people get hurt running to bomb shelters and falling and panicking, right? One kid up north was killed in a car accident because there was a missile attack. He didn't get hit by a missile. He had a car accident because he was panicking. And so
Exactly.
it's unacceptable. But the challenge is that we still show ourselves as a nation to be competent and creative and innovative and solution-oriented. And in a world that prizes oppression, we're not doing too well. We can't take that. We have to somehow build the narrative that we are a capable people, and at the same time, have that doesn't negate rights. That's unfortunately, we're in this modern world. The DEI concept of diversity, equity, inclusion, it's kind of like it's a hierarchy of oppression, and whoever's at the top of that hierarchy, the Jews are down the bottom. We're struggling, but we're still thriving. That's the irony, isn't it?
I think that I think we are who we are. We do what we do. We're just not very good at showing the world. And I think that's the problem, because branding is perception. The perception of the Jewish people, the perception of Israel, is not the reality of Israel. I mean, we're not perfect. We have a lot of things to fix. We have a way, and we're not completely innocent. I mean, we fucked up in many ways, but ultimately, we're a good people, and we are dedicated to making things better in our lives and trying to do the right thing by everyone. Those are just Jewish values, but not a lot of people know that because we have enemies who, going back to what I was saying before, for decades have been destroying our reputation before we can even get people to get to know us. So that's the biggest challenge, and that's what drives me with the work that I'm doing, and Eli with the work that he's doing, together and separately. And we've got a long road ahead. There's going to be no quick solutions, no quick fixes to this. It's going to take time. It's going to be ugly for a while.
I think one of the problems which we are addressing here in this conversation is the wrong term that we're using in Hebrew. I actually cannot stand the term Hasbara because, like you pointed out, it comes from a position of I need to explain myself, right? Which gives the impression that somehow I'm guilty of something, and therefore I need to explain how I didn't do wrong, right? Like that book Catch the Jew. I have it up here behind me, written by Tuvia Tenenbaum. It's such a talk about marketing. That's a great, to me, that really encapsulates, just like the I'm that Jew. Yes, I'm that Jew should be our message, and it is a psifas. What do you call that in English? Uh, Psifas is a oh no, it's what you make a picture out of a bunch of little.
Well, to try and tell you what a Hebrew word is. Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, so Israel is a very multicultural, multi-diverse nation, and so I'm that Jew, just like you did in your video, that 6-minute video. You highlighted like a gazillion different, who is that I am that Jew, and that's what's so beautiful about it is that anybody can be that I'm that Jew, can be that voice, can share that who I am as that Jew, but at the same time, the world is holding the catch the Jew doing wrong attitude, which is beautiful because you talked about Israel, right? Which is Jacob. He becomes Israel. Well, what did his brother call him? You know, aren't you that deceiver? Aren't you that one who stole the birthright? Aren't you the one? And he gave this false narrative, false accusation, which then later gets interpreted. I've noticed by at least the Christian audience I've spoken to many times. I'm like, that Jacob isn't this usurping, lying Jew. Okay, he's the one who's trying to be honest. He's the one who's trying to follow what God wants, and it's his brother who's is actually the one who's usurping and twisting words and lying about him and his identity and who he is, and actually even using his name in a wordplay to kind of turn it on its head. And I think that's really what we're up against, because that's, in the biblical narrative, we see it on the global narrative of today, is that the Jewish people are still being lied about by Esav, which has been represented as the nations, right? Or the Goim, who are trying to attack Israel throughout the history, right? So it's an interesting little deal there. And I think that's the issue is I think we need to get rid of this term Hasbara, and we need to create a word that actually means maybe advocacy, like you have in English.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that. I mean, I don't like the word either, but let's be honest. It's out of Hasbara lasbir, again, for the viewers who don't know, lasbir means to explain in Hebrew. There is going to be an immense amount of explaining that we need to do, and I think that that's fine. I don't think that changing. I mean, I don't like the term either. I like more statement-driven narratives. Like this is who I am. I actually like to quote Biggie Smalls. And I said this a few times in when I've been on stage speaking, because I just remember the East Coast West Coast beef, and when Tupac and Biggie Smalls were going at each other, and Tupac was from the West Coast, and Biggie Smalls, Notorious B.I.G., he was from the East Coast, and then Tupac was assassinated on the West Coast, and everyone was accusing Biggie Smalls of doing it, and then Biggie went to the West Coast, and he was being interviewed, and he said, the interviewer said, "Aren't you scared to be here? Like, people want to kill you because they think that you were behind the murder of Tupac." And he was like, "Well, I wasn't. And, to know me is to love me. And that's why I'm here." And I always remember that, like that he said, when people get to know me, they'll see who I really am. as opposed to the gossip and the rumors. And then, of course, unfortunately, he was murdered. But that idea of getting people to know you, I think that is the key. And that requires people to understand who they are, where they come from, i.e. their identity,
Mm-hmm.
and it requires them to speak up and not wait for legacy media to do it for them, not wait for Jewish organizations to do it for them, not wait for the Israeli government to do it for them. I think that the success of our narrative will actually come from the people, will actually come from people like you and like Eli and like myself and the people that we're hopefully inspiring to speak up for who you are, and then the organizations will catch up, the governments will catch up, the people will catch up. But it needs to be funded. It needs to be organized. Anyway, that's what I'm trying to build with IMNet.
And we're constantly dealing with preposterous lies. No one lies about him. Like the lies about the Jewish people. You seen some old Candace Owens just talking about Lakey?
Yeah.
And he's outrageous. It's like, how much more ridiculous can it become? It's literally going back to the medieval blood libels, right?
Yes.
And so on one hand, we can continue to like say, no, that's not true. Jewish people don't eat children.
We don't
Okay,
accept blood. I think one.
First of all, Jewish people don't let it be blooded in at all because it's not
Exactly.
it's that thing, right?
Yeah.
But we are on one hand going to have to keep countering the lies, the genocide thing, right? I mean, seriously,
Yes.
come on. It's just been over a year against a population where the Israeli army had, if it really wanted to, it could commit genocide. They got
Yes.
there's no evidence whatsoever. There's evidence of the contrary.
Yes.
There was a fear of an outbreak of polio. So the military arranged for 500,000 kids in Gaza to be given a vaccine against polio. We're selling you tons of food aid. There's no evidence whatsoever about, or genocide, and yet people still say that. So we're going to have to constantly counter all the lies, the misinformation, plus just genuine misunderstanding. Some people just don't understand the details.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's important to kind of teach people, and especially the Jewish people, why these organizations, why these individuals tell these lies.
Yeah.
If we can understand what's the motivation, what is someone trying to do when they dehumanize another culture?
And that's dehumanization.
Yeah.
What's driving it? Like, there's like a scumbag hidden back there and it's coming out with these preposterous accusations.
Yeah.
So part of what we're trying to do is alert people to not just counter every lie, to be able to recognize why people do it and how they do it, and then it loses its sting, right? Yeah. This is a part of this honest reporting. They got a great Instagram account, social media presence. Just start to see what does misinformation look like. The headline is something like 100 Palestinians killed in overnight raid by Israel or something like this, right? There's no context. There's nothing there that something similar happened. I'm referring to a specific situation. So what happened was Hamas was firing missiles from inside of a space that was designated for Palestinians as a safe space. Suppose the IDF had said, remove yourself from this region. There's Hamas infrastructure. We're going to bomb it. Move to this safe space. So Hamas started firing rockets from inside the safe space. Now, if you have a rockets fired at you, what are you going to do? You've got to get the rockets.
Yep.
So Israel sent in their forces to take out the rockets, and unfortunately, innocent Palestinians were killed. That was Hamas' strategy.
Correct.
Now, there's nothing of that in the headline. It just made Israel bad. But somehow, if enough of the population can start to recognize lack of context, misleading headlines, I think we should be abandoning the BBC, the Guardian, all these CNN's not innocent either. No. All of these media. When we see this, it's like, if I subscribe to you, I unsubscribe. I on YouTube, I say, don't show me any videos from this. We need to make a stand against them. They go, that's not okay. We won't accept that.
I agree 100%. You want to boycott, divest Israel. What we should be doing is boycott, divest all of these falsifying news agencies that are not telling the news. They're pushing a propaganda narrative, which is being propagated by terrorists. So essentially, I think to put it in context, imagine if the United States, who's fighting against ISIS and Al Qaeda in Afghanistan, Iraq, and then the news reporting back in the West is that the poor Afghani, the poor Iraqi civilians have been targeted again by U.S. airstrikes, by U.S. forces, da 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 da. The same that they report about us. How would that reflect on the warfighters that are going and laying down their lives for the safety of Americans, fighting tyranny, fighting what will eventually be on your doorstep, which I've tried to explain to Americans. Are like, well, I don't get that. That's his Israeli propaganda, Zionist propaganda in Washington trying to set. I'm like, really? Well, guess what happens if you don't do that? Israel's at the front lines. If they defeat us and if they succeed with us, they're moving on to the what they call the Sunday people. We're the Saturday people. You're the Sunday people. You're next in line, and that's what we just saw recently on the 1st of July. You saw this crazy January, sorry, this crazy terrorist attack, and everybody's like in shock in America. They're in shock,
I think
traumatized by one attack,
it makes
right?
complete sense, though. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to a lot of it comes down to media. You
Yeah.
know, the strategy of it's not just when we say the terrorists, people think it's someone holding an RPG. No, terrorism is also thinking. It's also strategizing. It's also people behind the ones carrying the weapons. It's the people
Yes.
who are funding it. Strategy is 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 implementing. How we got to implement this vision.
With
So
communication.
yeah, exactly. So when you see the work that they've done, that is their strategy to influence the masses through media, and we're outnumbered, and we
Mhm.
really are. You have a base of 1.6 to 2 billion Arabs and Muslims who are being manipulated, who are being taught for the most part to show intolerance towards the Jewish state. Now, I'm not just throwing that out there as an accusation. I'm trying to be very cold with facts because you don't see Muslims and Arabs in their masses protesting the heinous
Mhm.
activities that
Yeah.
are being perpetrated in the name of their religion. They're not out there in the streets. So this is an indication of our enemy's strategy working. Now, we're outnumbered. We're 16 million people. So what we're doing is we're trying to put the truth out there, hoping that the middle ground who is silent, just like what you're doing, you're trying to speak to people who are being influenced by this false narrative, who are buying into the propaganda. So what
Mhm.
you really have to do is you have to get behind the curtain. You have to kind of see where it's coming from. You have to dig really, really deep. You have to follow the money, and you have to start focusing on that as you, which is the Hasbara, the explaining bit, as you also speak about who we are and what
Mhm.
our values are and why we would never do such a thing that they're accusing us of, besides um, lone instances or kind of like, we're always going to have one or two bad apples spoiling things for everyone, but it's not the mindset of our people and our values.
Yeah.
So it makes complete sense that people would be in this situation where they're challenging you. What doesn't make sense is why are we not doing something about it in a big way? Well, that unfortunately also makes sense to me. It's because people don't understand, and you see this all the time in companies. People don't understand the power of the spoken word. They don't understand the power of narrative. They don't understand why communication is so, so, so necessary. Because if you look at our enemies, that's what they invested in. They invested in narrative. So we're still kind of like trying to
Yeah.
like look at people and say, why aren't you getting behind the people doing the same thing? But let's make it organized and let's do it
Mhm.
for the long run. This is going to be a marathon. It's not going to happen overnight. It's got to be invested in. So
Yeah.
that's what we know as communication specialists
Yeah.
is there's dismissal of narrative. Let's get more bulletproof vests. Let's get helmets. Let's supply arms. Great. All of that is important, but narrative will save lives if you invest in it.
Correct.
Because if you'd invested in narrative for decades with a lot of money with the right people, the right messaging, then we wouldn't be living in this October 8th world, which is us justifying our existence, because we'd have put the foundation of who we are already into the middle ground's eye, who would be hopefully making up for the numbers that we lack with our story. That's
Yeah.
what we need to do, but it's a long play. It's a long, long play.
And we're
Yeah.
working against a lot of natural forces. Let me phrase it this way: Sun Tzu, in The Art of War, one of his first lines was "gain the moral high ground."
Yep.
And that. So what our enemies do is actually quite easy to do. They put money into it, but it doesn't take much to accuse someone. If I accuse someone, or I said that person attacked you the other day, right? He's a mean person. He attacked me. They're
Yeah.
going to prove it. That by the time we go through the courts, they check where he was, where I was. That's taken years. The headlines already disappeared. It's very easy to accuse people of things and then just let them kind of deal with it. The
Mhm.
other thing,
Yeah. I just will say, like, accusations are titillating. Accusations are controversial. They're like, oh, I want to hear more. Explanations? It's just boring. No one wants to know. They tune out.
That's
and
right.
accusing people is easy. Blaming people is also fantastic. Now, you want to get people over the side, just say your life sucks. It's not your fault. It's them. It's the
Yeah.
Jews. It is. This tiny population of 10 million people is the cause of all the world's problems. You go to, like, how many people on the planet right now? This tiny. It's nothing, right?
And
Yeah.
they don't
Yeah.
know. The people who are hearing it, they don't. They think Israel is some continent. You ask the average American, they don't know how big Israel is. With all the news, they wear on Middle East.
Yeah. Yeah.
Accusation is to make and very hard to counter. And by the time you've counted them, the news has moved on. Blaming people for your problems to someone else, it's a scapegoating concept. That's very easy to do. It's been done throughout, Adolf Hitler. He was brilliant at that. Your
Mhm.
problem, their fault. So Israel, the Jewish people, we've got to be super clever. We got to explain that. We've got to explain the lies. We've got to teach people how to see through the lies.
Mhm.
We got to show our own, story, tell our own story and our own narrative,
Right.
and we go put against the grain in a way. We got the difficult job, so we have to become so good at this, and this is why having someone like Eitan on board who's been doing this kind of thing for big companies. Oh, seriously, we need people who know this
Yeah.
world to invest in it.
I agree
There's only
100%. I agree
gonna be
100%. Yeah. So yeah, the power of lashon hara is definitely devastating, which is why you know. Yeah, it's devastating, which is why it's such an important Jewish foundation of what not to do. Right. What we for
Islam on speaking audience. Lashon hara is
Literally the
bad mouth, the
bad tongue.
It's a it's like a proclamation against speaking badly about.
yeah.
Even like the bad gossip, it's not looked on well in the Jewish culture.
And by the way, we're the worst at it. I honestly think that the Jewish people, and we actually made a piece about it, and separately we've made pieces about it too, which is like right now the threat that we're facing is existential. Anyone speaking up for who we are is important, and to show unity and to not talk that. For example, if you're a Republican Jew or a Democrat Jew before the election, and even after the amount of vitriol from one Jew to another because they oppose each other politically was horrifying. It's the same thing, by the way, in Israel. If you're a Bibi supporter or if you're the opposition supporter,
Mhm.
so it doesn't mean that you can't criticize. You can, and one of the things that we speak about is what everyone has to say is important. Differing opinions are important.
Yes.
How you say it, how you disagree is critical. And I think that lashon hara, the bad tongue, the putting people down, the gossip, I think that that's something that we as a community need to work on as well. Let's learn how to disagree again and show up for each other the next morning. So lashon
Yeah.
hara is also something that we need to work on, because when you're in an existential threat, it's like all hands on deck. Let's get to work. So
Yes.
anyway,
Yeah. I just got thought of this actually because I had a good friend who's a rabbi, and he sent me this piece about. Here it is. Because he says to me, because I was discussing this issue of basically the smearing of people online and how I find it, just distasteful. Even if it's true, like what are you trying to get at? Like, what do you get out of, highlighting an individual and their mistakes, right? And saying, well, you can't listen to anything they say anymore because of this one lie. Because everything you've ever said has always been truthful, right? You've never made a mistake, you've never misspoke, you never said something, you meant it one way, it came out the other way, right? In other words, there's many reasons why something could be the way it is. And yet, we're so quick to just, throw that person under the bus, so to speak. And
Like,
so he said,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, so he sent me this quote. And it's in Hebrew, of course. So it says, כל אחד ואחד מארבעה ועשרים אנשים אלו שמינינו, אף על פי שהן ישראל, אין להן חלק לעולם הבא. So you don't have a place in the world to come. He's giving I think this is the Rambam giving categories, ויש עבירות קלות מאלו, אף על ידיהן שהרגיל בהן אין לו חלק לעולם הבא. I'll just get to the bottom line, which is ומתכבד בקלון חברו. In other words, the one who belittles his friend, the one who elevates himself by belittling his fellow man, and he has no place in the world to come. It's like, dang, what a heavy statement from Jewish rabbis and from the sages. Yet we kind of flippantly don't even think about it today, because I think social media, my problem with social media, one of, is that it pluralizes us, right? It makes us divided and into camps, because it caters to us and our worldview just through the algorithm. And I think we forget to realize that, hey, listening to a different opinion, that's not going to kill you. In fact, you should listen to the other opinion. You should be open to hear everybody's worldview on whatever the matter is that is very important to you, and be challenged, so that maybe, you know what I'm saying? So you're not just justifying yourself through hanging out with your own friends. Maybe your worldview isn't really 100% solid. Maybe there's something that you need to consider that you haven't, because you're too busy listening to the same people.
Well, that goes back to Jewish values. One
Yeah.
of the Jewish values is having humility and listening and hearing and wrestling with it. I mean, you think about kids in yeshivas. What do they do all day? They're wrestling with each other. They're learning to argue verbal.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that, like you said, in social media, and I'm guilty of it myself. Lately I've been much more careful for the last year and a half to not get into heated debates online.
Mm.
But I think that we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of community building to do. It's something else that we're trying to do together, which is, we're part of a community, and a community needs to work together, even if you have differences. And that requires a level of maturity. It requires hearing. It requires challenging is okay, but the what is not always more important. The what of what you're saying is not necessarily more important than the how you say it, because you can literally make points that are very valid that people will not hear you because of how you're expressing it, which is a real shame. And I think we need to get better at that. Unless you're faced with real hatred and intolerance, and then it's I think okay, that's not acceptable.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. You're right. It doesn't mean that you need to be passive and just anything that comes by, to be silent. But I think the important thing is how do we react to controversy and whatever? And you want to be part of the smearing of an individual that will gain you somehow brownie points for whatever you're trying to sell, so to speak. Um,
But it
and
goes back to what
you
you
know,
were saying
yeah.
about the art of war in the first line. It's just like gain the upper hand. I mean, that's literally what you're trying to do by put someone down, put a lie out there, or you're trying to win the argument before it's even started. And I just
Mm,
think many times it's very immature,
mm,
and counterproductive.
And our enemies are very, very good at lying, and they take it as a tactic. It's strategic.
yeah.
And the work we found out about this with the El Ahli hospital, which was bombed mistakenly by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And
Immediately.
immediately, Hamas, the authorities in Gaza, they turned that around. They said Israel bombed a hospital. They even gave a number of how many casualties there were, which is impossible to do in any short amount of time, and the
Right.
rest of the media ran with that. And it
Yeah.
turned out the next day that not only was it not Israel, it was the Palestinian militants themselves that hit the hospital, hit the car park of the hospital. May have been a few casualties. It was nowhere close to 500. Well, that was actually ridiculous. A few cars were burnt. There's a very intentional effort to twist the truth, to make things up. There's a term which you may have heard called Pallywood, which is the Palestinian militant groups will actually stage atrocities, and sometimes they've been caught because someone's they're filming it on their iPhone or something, and that gets out. You see that the whole thing's staged. Now, it's not to say that all the things we see in Gaza are staged. No, of course not.
Correct.
But
Correct.
but our enemies use truth as a weapon. Right? They well, not truth, but say perception. They use perception as a weapon. And then the Jewish people and the Israeli people don't do this at all. In fact, on the opposite, they're too honest almost, right? But
Mm-hmm.
we're
Yeah.
not going to inflate the number of casualties in Israel. No Israeli is going to do that in order to get sympathy from the global media, right? No one's going to pretend that if the IDF made a mistake, for example, and accidentally, to reverse the situation in Gaza, accidentally hit the civilian facility in Israel, they're never going to say, oh, well, that was actually Hamas, right? They're going to say the IDF messed up and those people will be held accountable. So we don't, and it's a good thing, but we don't use perception as a weapon. So we're
Mm-hmm.
up against that. We're up against people who very calculatedly think about how we can cause the global population to think a certain thing, and the truth is irrelevant. Like, again, the genocide case. It can
Mm-hmm.
be disproven so easily,
Yeah.
and yet they still push it because that's part of their overall strategy. And the West is up against a real enemy here that they're not prepared for. They're not prepared to face.
Right.
They don't understand this
Right.
your perception as a weapon, the weaponization of the legal system. What we see at the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice. The West is not ready for that. Then you've got anyone who speaks against any sort of militant terrorism is branded as being racist or something. So that's also part of the strategy to silence dissent. Then you've
Mm-hmm.
got the actual violence itself and the random, unpredictable nature, like the New Orleans attack you mentioned.
Yeah.
So there's many levels of protection, which the Israeli public is wise to. So October 7th was a failure. That it was a momentary failure.
Mm-hmm.
But Israel is generally alert to all these different techniques and methods. The West is not.
Yeah. So what is your final message here that you would like to help, I guess, really Westerners that are living in a reality that's different to ours, but are actually facing the same threats? I mean, essentially, they are literally facing the same threats. It just hasn't knocked on their doorstep in the same way as it has for
Well,
us.
I mean, we've been here before. I actually just put out a piece the other day, which in which I say, "Have you forgotten 9/11?"
Mm, mm,
You got to think about 9/11. 9/11 is not something, the response to 9/11 was not a response against the entire Muslim world or the entire Arab world. It was a wake-up call for the West to understand that there are people, there are entities stationed in these intolerant countries led by intolerant people who have an agenda. And this agenda is not just directed at the Jewish people, which represents Judeo-Christian values and is on the front lines. It will come and it will bite you in the ass and it will kill you.
yeah.
That's what brought the Twin Towers down, with over 3,000 people were killed. And in this video I just put out there, I say, have you forgotten? Have you forgotten to teach your children? And they have forgotten. So unfortunately, I think that the only way for the West to ultimately wake up will be something catastrophic, which really hurts them, unfortunately,
Mm,
because they're not heeding not the advice. It's not the advice. They're not heeding what you can literally see on the ground. And I think that until that happens, people are not going to really give a shit. Um, Generations have passed since 9/11. Kids don't know what happened, and I don't want to get into because we can talk about the examples, but on TikTok, when
Right.
people were supporting, yeah, Bin Laden, and it wasn't one or two videos or one or two isolated videos.
Yeah.
I think that that's what the West is up against, and it's a very tricky thing to do because in this world that we're living in with DEI, you're not allowed to say certain things. Now, when we say what we're saying, we're not putting Arabs down and we're not putting Muslims down. What we're saying is there is an issue in that culture that they themselves are not addressing, that they need to address, because the solution can only come from that world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if the solution isn't coming from that world, it's going to get worse and worse and worse and more acceptable until something big happens. And then it'll be a response to 9/11 again. A country will be invaded. Islamic jihadist entities will be taken out. But really, we're up against a mass production of anti-Western values that needs to be, with that the West needs to look at in the eye. I don't even want to talk about Tommy Robinson and what's happening in England,
Right.
but it's an epidemic, and people need to speak up and not be afraid to speak up. Like, look at what I'm wearing. Wearing a Zionist, sweatshirt.
Yep.
I have a month by wearing this, but I don't care. At this stage, I don't care anymore. This is the truth. People don't even know what a Zionist is. I'm not going to let the enemies determine what a Zionist is. I'm going to explain what being a Zionist means, which is there's nothing controversial about it. And you have to step up a little. But I think only the people, only the people will be able to make this a subject, a topic, which shows its leadership, that it's that important. And I think that's something that needs to happen. We have an uphill struggle ahead of us. We're outnumbered, outfunded. We've been outsmarted. I think we'll win the war, but if right now, we have a lot of work to do.
Mm.
And you're hearing a lot of people across the internet saying one thing: wake up. You're hearing it all the time: wake up. It's in the comments, it's in the videos, it's in social media. I think there's more than wake up. I think people can see what's going on. I don't believe that people can see all the attacks in Europe, because if you're living in Europe, you know about it. Most people
Mm-hmm.
outside don't know about it. If you're in Sweden, you've seen your country change dramatically. The
Mm-hmm.
UK, they know about it. They're seeing it. They're seeing the mobs in the street. They're seeing the grooming gangs. A lot of that's coming out now. That's been covered up. In the U.S., people know about the Boston bombing. They know about now New Orleans. They know about all these jihadist attacks over time. I I find it very hard to believe that people cannot see that. I think that what we're lacking in the world in general is the courage to face it. It's not to
Mm-hmm.
wake up, to stand up
Mm-hmm.
and to start to discern between a true threat and pure racism. And if you're against someone because of the color of their skin, their religion, their culture, you're an atheist. That's ridiculous. But it doesn't matter what color, skin, race, religion anyone is. If they're doing atrocious things, then they should be held accountable. Equal law applied to all people,
Mm.
and it's up to us to defend the children of our nations.
Which includes the children of our enemies.
Mm-hmm.
They're innocents. The people that are being killed, the
Yeah,
people that are being. I'm not talking about like in Gaza, but in Gaza as well. Kids are being killed.
yeah.
It's awful, and we're being put in a position to defend our children. So we have to take our enemies out, and with our enemies come the people that they're intentionally putting in harm's way. But our enemies are also doing that to children in Yemen, children in Sudan,
Yeah.
children in many Arab countries. Look at what's happened to the Iranian people because of the current Iranian regime.
In Syria now, there's atrocities coming out of Syria that's not being reported.
So we have an
Mm-hmm.
obligation also to speak up for the intolerance that these awful leaders in these countries and these organizations are imposing on really innocent people, children.
Yeah.
It's hatred. It's the indoctrination of hate. So it's something that needs to be openly discussed without fear of retribution because of this DEI world and this work world. And that doesn't mean, as Emmy said, that if you're just racist because you're just racist and you're as intolerant, then you're an asshole. You just are, and you need to be called out. But we need to get back to a world where people can discuss things openly, respectfully, maturely. Unfortunately, it's just not, that stuff is kind of bored. It's not titillating enough. What's really interesting for media is show dead people, show arguments online, show Piers Morgan with his guests trying to kind of like get viewership by being controversial. I miss
Mm-hmm.
the days of the news when the news was literally just, it was facts. It was just, here are the facts. This is what happened today. Make your own opinion about it.
Mm-hmm.
Social media today is really bad. But there's one thing that we didn't talk about, which I really wanted to, which is how Ellie and I met, because I think people would want to. I mean, I know we touched on it, but like,
Yeah,
what are
go
we
for
trying? I'd love to talk about that. So,
it.
um, I've been doing what I've been doing for quite a while, putting narratives out there, spoken narratives out there, and I am who I am, and I have my way of doing it. Ellie and I met, and then shortly after we met, I started seeing things that Ellie was doing, and Ellie would pick up a microphone, and he'd do what he does so well. He would take these complex subjects and he would break them down, which is something that I do as well, but in a different way. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm a branding guy, and so I saw what Ellie was doing, and I really, really respected the work that he was doing. And I said, well, what if we created something together where we make it about facts, but we do it in a very empathetic way, where we're really speaking as just as who we are, as opposed to this media circus show, and we play it straight. We try and keep them short, and we brand it. Now, why is branding so important? It's because when you make a video where you're talking about a certain subject, then it's, if it lands and if it resonates, it's good and it'll stand the test of time. But something that is branded and that you pour a lot of energy to, and you shoot in a certain way, in a way that is memorable, and it has a certain format, why don't we create, and we talked about this, why don't we try and create pieces that are mythbusters, that also are statement driven, but also they stand the test of time. So you want to hear something about who Hamas is, you can do it on in December of 2023, shortly after October 7th, but you can still share that video in 5 years time. So
Mm-hmm.
we decided to do that. um, I mean, I just tried to raise some funds, and we've done 2 seasons so far. We're working on a third, and we found that people really appreciate the integrity of the pieces. A lot of that boils down to the subjects that we pick together. Ellie doing a lot of research, us working on the scripts together, how we just speak naturally. It isn't an act. We sit there, we obviously record it, but we try and provide facts with ownership of 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 our narrative, as opposed to a defensive posture. And that's how we met, and I think that's where we align, and we're continuing to do it. It requires a lot of work, and they take a lot of time. It's not like picking up a camera. The amount of research that goes into what Ellie does as a first step after we pick the subjects together, and then tightening it, and sometimes we'll be reading a script, and we'll be like, hold on a second, hold on. As we're reading, we're like, let's fact check that, just make sure. And in the middle of reading a script, we correct it.
Yeah.
Integrity is really important.
Yeah, and many times I'll put up a video. This is separate to what I've done. The work with Eitan is a little bit more produced. I've taken more time to really research the script, etc. But often I'll just shoot something because I see something in the news. I'll shoot it. I put it up. Then someone contacts me and says, that's not quite true, and immediately I take it down. There's no
Mm-hmm.
room for any misinformation, if it was accidental.
Yeah.
It
True.
Credibility is everything, right? It's got to be backed up by research, and so that takes more time, but it's got to be solid. There's, in the world of lies,
Mm-hmm.
we say the Jewish people, and really freedom-loving people everywhere, Jewish or not, it really doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
there's a need right now for us to be the keepers of the truth. We are being swamped by by an avalanche of lies. And certain of us who have first of all, the understanding that that is happening, and then have the courage to speak it. We have to stand up and say, that is not true. The truth matters. And that's what we're all about.
Yeah. I think
Mm.
I think that's what's resonating, and it's meant to. I mean, Ellie and I say this a lot. The reason is not for there are a lot of advocates out there who are doing great work, and it's all hands on deck. But there's a lot of people also doing the work, which I think is, and you can see people are starting to see that it's some of it is very very self-serving and a little bit narcissistic. I'm not putting anyone down. I think the work is important. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it about the work, make it about the message. It's not about
Mm.
us. And we're trying to get past the Jewish sphere. So a lot of times Ed and I will do the uncool thing and we'll ask people in the comments, please share the video. Because if we can if we can galvanize the Jewish base to share the truth, then it'll go past the Jewish base. It'll go back past the echo chamber.
Yeah.
And there's space for lack of integrity. There's no space for hatred and intolerance. We're doing the best that we can, but we need the community to also share voices of reason and integrity and people who are doing it for the right reasons. And I think that we're doing our best, but we need more people to share and understand that this is in the interest of all. And what Eddie said right now is super important. If Eddie, and this has happened with me before as well, with certain posts that I make, someone will call me on it. They'll reach out to me privately and say that's not actually 100% true. There's also then I'll go back and I'll revise it and I'll edit it. Truth is everything and it serves everyone. And the truth is the most harmful thing to the people that want to destroy the state of Israel and the Jewish people. The
Yeah.
truth is the most important. It's the most powerful weapon, but we need more launchers of truth. We need more people who are willing to take that step with us and put it out there, and get to the middle ground. If we can get to the middle ground, then we can start countering the immense outnumbering that we're up against.
Correct. It's entirely possible in this day and age for a single person to have a following of millions of people. That
Mhm.
happens all. So we're outnumbered in raw terms, but there's no reason why a handful of Jewish content creators with quality research, fact check content can reach hundreds of millions of people.
With back and so so if anyone wants to back us, get in touch with me. Because we need
It's a lot of work.
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of expenses. A lot of time. We
Yep.
take time out of paid work. We put paid work aside. That costs money. There's studio fees. There's recording fees. There's editing fees. There's a lot that goes into it.
100%. So I definitely have learned that firsthand and can agree 100%. I mean, it's exactly what you guys are saying. The content isn't going to create itself, so to speak, out of nothing. You just like any business, there has to be money flow that goes into and out of, and
This the big problems that we have is like when it comes to creativity, and you can see this as a creative endeavor. People are like, oh well, it just people just think that it happens that we get up
yeah,
one morning, record something,
yeah,
and the amount of time it requires to write one script is weeks and weeks of work. Forget about recording and editing and music and everything that we need to do.
yeah,
And I think that the mindset also as well, they're just going to do it anyway because because they enjoy it. We don't.
exactly.
It's not something that we enjoy doing. It's a necessity.
Yeah.
And the message really is to people of means and organizations to get behind the people who are doing the work, and you
Mhm.
can see where the work is actually working. You can see it in the results of what's being spread. What are people getting behind? Which is why I keep going back to the people will be able to put the pressure on the powers that be to make the changes, and not the other way around. It's going to come from the bottom up and not from the top down. If it comes from the top down, big organizations are going to be spending $50,000 on speakers that come and they shoot a video and clap, and that's it, as opposed to the longer, more boring, more difficult work of thinking strategically, getting the right people on board, and doing what's necessary as opposed to doing what's sexy. And I think that we need the people on the ground to understand that, and to support the people who are doing that. And there are quite a few of us.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important that if we understand that right now there is a battle for our culture, for our society. It's not just Israel. It's about Western values of freedom, of the values we consider liberal, and it does not necessarily ultimate, extremely progressive values. Just simply having the freedom to choose to live the way you want to live, be the person you want to be, with fair systems of justice, etc. That's all under attack right now. And if that goes, everything goes. And the first battle is for the mind of the public. Like Sun Tzu said, the first thing is to gain the moral high ground. And so anyone that's listening to this, if you interact with the post, just comment. Even if you just say, a lot of people will say, emoji. Yeah, put an emoji. They'll just say commenting to help it go viral. Just put whatever, because that helps it to at least click like. I mean, I come across people who say, man, I saw your post, it was fantastic. And I didn't see that they even liked it. So click like, at least is it to reach more people. Forward it, put a story, send it to someone, send a link in WhatsApp. That's what makes the difference. The battle is for your mind. And together we can amplify our message and we can make a difference.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I enjoy most is, and we get a lot of these. I mean, we get a lot of these with the independent work that we do, but certainly with E+C, Eli and Eitan, our series, is the responses from the non-Jewish community, the people who get it and who are spreading our message, and there are a lot of them that understand that this is not about the Jewish people. This is about Judeo-Christian values. This is about the West, and they need, what you lose, because you didn't speak up, maybe you deserve to lose it. And that's a very harsh thing to say, but it's on all of us to do something like that. Yeah, you have to earn it. I try and teach my children, like, when they lose a benefit, or when they're punished for something, because they're kids and you have to teach them discipline. It's like, well, what did you do? What did you actually do to maintain, to earn, to keep? And they're like, at the end of the day, they didn't do anything. Well, I said, well, maybe you deserve to lose that right, or that bonus, or that, the extra screen time, because you didn't do what's necessary. And I think that more people need to do what's necessary. And I love seeing the non-Jewish community getting behind and understanding what we're up against and speaking up for it. I think it's really important.
And this is not about Israel. No one cares about Israel. It's that Israel is a free, democratic nation in a land where our neighbors do not want them. If Israel was a dictatorship along the lines of the regimes around us, if Israel was dirt poor, there'd be no problem. If we were chopping off hands, if someone stole a loaf of bread, or would be no problem. Right? Yeah. The fact Israel is a thriving democracy, happy, healthy, prosperous, they hate that. They want to bring that down. And they want to do the same thing all around the world now.
Well, brothers, I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you for the important tidbits that you brought to the table here. That is, I think, going to really give people food for thought. It's going to help them to understand the battle that we're fighting here. It's not just a war on the ground, but there is a battle in the social media realm. It's a battle for our minds. It's a battle for the truth. And I really take my hat off for y'all, just being on the front lines and being willing to throw yourselves in full, head first, as we say, right, into this. And you're doing a great job. I will make sure to have all of your links and everything that people can contact you and connect with you to this video. So please, guys, make sure to look in the description. And you will find how to connect with them, how to support what they're doing, and get behind them, because this is vital for the state of Israel, for the truth, and for the West. Guys, thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And guys, thank you for being part of it and sharing your important wealth of knowledge on this subject matter.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate it. Thank you. Take care.
Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.